You're listening to Viewpoint, a podcast of Highlands Church. Well, welcome everyone. Viewpoint is a podcast discussing challenging cultural issues from the Bible's point of view. We want to equip the church to follow Jesus, and that means we need to be able to encounter the world around us with the truth of the gospel. I'm Brendan Anderson, the Weekend Services Pastor here at Highlands Church, and I'm joined as always by our Pastor of Adult Education, Joe Infranco. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thanks, Brendan. Great to be with you as always.
Yes, and as of this recording, it is now the year 2024, and in so many ways, it feels like we're living in the future. The fast pace of the culture means that we have new technology coming at us all the time, and one of the biggest developments over the last year is what we're going to be talking about today, artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is quickly finding its way into so many aspects of life, whether we're even aware of it or not. AI can write our emails, generate amazing photos and graphics. It can diagnose diseases. It can have a friendly chat with us via text. It can write millions of lines of code. It can even create lifelike videos of people who don't really exist. And there is so much more. So the question we're really wrestling with today is this. As Christians, how should we think about AI? Is it just another technology tool like television or the internet? Or is there something more to it that we need to be thinking about? Is AI something we should be suspicious of, or should we embrace it? Or how about this? Does AI present new opportunities to share the gospel with the world? Will it replace pastors or church staff? What do we do with this new thing? Now, Joe and I are going to be the first to admit we are by no means experts in AI, so we knew we were going to need some help with this discussion, and we have an amazing guest with us today. Joe, would you introduce him a little bit for us?
Yeah, but we're really fortunate and privileged to have Elijah Lowe. Let me tell you a little bit about Elijah. He's an accomplished strategy consultant. He specializes in both the private and public sectors. He's got a real diverse client base, not only in the U.S., also in Australia and Asia. And he provides valuable guidance and strategy development, but his real passion, and I think some of this may come out in our discussion, is in the transformation of cities and communities. And we'll be talking about his book and referring to it. I think you can get a sense of his optimism and how faith could work and how AI could be a transformative force for our cities and our communities. Currently, Elijah is engaged in the dynamic field of software development, harnessing the power of artificial intelligence, and we'll shorthand that AI from this point on, and in particular, how AI drives innovation. His expertise extends across multiple industries, including wireless technology, software development, real estate, and automotive industries. I've heard him speak a few times. I follow most of what he says. I like him as an expert because when somebody knows enough more that I can't always understand where they're going, I feel like this is the person I want to learn more from. He has an extensive background and deep understanding of these sectors and a lot of valuable insights. By way of background, he has a BBA, a triple major in finance and investment banking, marketing, management, and human resources. You know, he's a typical underachiever academically. He has a master's and a doctorate in theology. But he also has served in ministry. He spent 12 years in ministry, helping to plant 23 churches in a Muslim nation we won't name. And he is just an all-around fascinating guest. I love listening to him. Elijah, welcome to the broadcast.
It's a privilege and honor.
And we're looking forward to a stimulating conversation. But I feel like as far as AI goes, we always have early adapters, those kind of middle adapters, late adapters. I'm not certain whether there were a lot of early adapters in AI. It feels to me like it's kind of like it's sneaked up on us. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are now talking about it. And the result of that is, I think there's not really a lot of understanding what AI is. Some people are wondering, is it just another technological tool like a printing press or television or the internet? Is there something different about it? And, you know, I just think perhaps a good starting point, Brendan, I'd like to ask you because you use it more than I do. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm playing around all the time with my Chat GPT. What are some of the ways we've been using AI here at church?
Yeah, on the writing end, Joe, certainly you're probably using it a lot more than we are over the creative side. So I oversee the video team and the graphic design folks that we have here at the church. And we actually have been using AI creatively to generate things. So our Adobe suite of products has AI prompts that you can type in. And so if we need to generate an image, we can just type in what we want to see, whether it's an open meadow or a sky full of stars or whatever it is. And so instead of seeking out these images that pre-exist online like we used to, we can type in an AI prompt and have it generate something. We typically don't use it raw from what it gives us. We usually manipulate it from there, but boy, it's a great jumping off point. So creatively, we've been using some visual AI tools over on my team.
Yeah, I mean, I've played around with a lot of things. It's very helpful in writing and summarizing theological points, but I enjoy fiction. I've written fiction. I've asked my, ChatGPT to write paragraphs in the style of authors I would name, and I gave the scenarios. And my goodness, I thought some of these authors had come back and were writing again. So it's a fascinating thing to see. So let's kick it over to our guest. Elijah, what is AI? Don't people tend to use the expression now loosely as a kind of catch-all? What is AI?
Joe, you're absolutely right. I think to have a meaningful conversation about AI, we first need to define our understanding of AI. Otherwise, what happens is that you can have two people having a conversation about AI with both people having absolutely different ideas of in their mind of what AI is. So AI stands for artificial intelligence. The best way to conceptualize it is that the AI for technology is what the mind is for humans. Okay, so it's not the brain, it's the mind. Okay, so if you want to think about it that way, it's some people like to refer it as the software, but it's not quite the software as well. It's a subcategory of software that allows technology to think or to express certain functions of the human mind. Okay, that's the best way to describe it. So think about it as the mind for technology, and that's what AI is. And broadly speaking, AI can be categorized into three main categories. And those categories are important, especially when we start having discussion on more controversial parts about AI. Okay, so the first category is what we call narrow AI. And narrow AI is simply that, it's just taking one cognitive function of the brain, of the mind, the human mind, and training the AI to do just that. Okay, so example of a narrow AI would be, like natural language processing, okay, NLP, or machine learning, or robotics, or computer vision.
That would include robotic surgery, things we're taking for granted now.
Yeah, and it's been around for a long time. Okay, narrow AI has been around for a long time. A recent narrow AI development that was launched in public that really captured the imagination of the public is what we call large language models, LLM, and that's where you get ChatGPT. Okay, but the reason why it captured the imagination of the public is because it looks like it's crossing over into the second category. And I'm going to talk about the second category. But more importantly, it sparked the imagination of people that we are so close into the second category of AI, which is AGI, that if we make a little bit more push, we'll actually achieve it. Okay. AGI has to do with artificial general intelligence. And that's basically saying that that AI has reached a point where it can do everything a human mind can do like a human.
Let me interrupt. That would include the ability to learn?
Yes, ability to learn, ability to logically reason things, the ability to think through things like the way a human does. Not trained for a specific task, but it can be used for anything, like the way your human mind can. Okay, and that's AGI, and ASI basically is AGI, but just extending that and saying, if we can achieve AGI, then it kind of like we can extrapolate from that. If we push a little bit harder, we'll have artificial superintelligence, which basically it means that it's some multiple of what a human mind can do. So it's whatever a human mind can do times 10.
So let me try to summarize this, make sure we're following you. We have the three categories: narrow AI, which is already happening; AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is now on the scene. It has arrived. And then we have super artificial intelligence, which sounds to me more like the work of science fiction or something like that.
Yeah. Basically, we have not achieved AGI yet. Okay. We have sparked the imagination to achieve AGI. Okay, so a lot of companies, since the launch of ChatGPT, is racing towards achieving AGI. So that's kind of where we're at.
Now, I know this is not an easy question. When would there be a consensus? What would it take for us as a society to say we think that we've achieved AGI? When do you and I look at each other and say, oh my goodness, it's here, we're in AGI?
I think we achieve it when, the AI can basically replace an entire human being as an employee. Say someone that's working in a department or in a church situation, someone that's working in church, in some form of desk job, and you can replace that entire person with an AI.
Would you hazard a guess how near we are to that time?
I think it's going to happen within 3 years. If I were to put a timeline to it, just because the sheer amount of investments that's going to it, on not just on very large corporate levels, but also on national levels. So this is where I need to introduce, the concept of we cannot look at AI just from a US perspective, okay? Because we have sparked the imagination of AGI on a global level by the launch of ChatGPT. So let me give you an example. China, when ChatGPT was launched, the government convened and realign their national agenda to basically, invest 100% into AI. And so within 5 months, they launched 4,300 AI companies. Okay. And they are throwing trillions of dollars, okay, into trying to achieve AGI before the US. So when we talk about policy issue, when we talk about some of our fears as society, and the regulations and stuff like this, we got to understand it from a global and more macro perspective. Understand that whatever regulation we put here on AI doesn't apply to China. And that means there's a potential for China to, leapfrog us in AI technology, if we do things to slow down the development of AI in the US.
So as we look at sort of being in the realm of narrow AI, maybe some examples that we're thinking about, we have really language processing that can kind of take in language input, understand some keywords, and then spit back an answer. That's kind of your basic Siri, your Hey Google, your Alexas.
Right.
I don't really even think most people would categorize that as AI. That's simply sort of an enhanced voice interactive search that we've had for many years.
Agreed.
But what we've seen recently, especially in the last year, what's captured the headlines is something like what you've mentioned already a few times, and that is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is something a little bit different. And so for anybody who has not used it or elements of other Google has Google Bard, Microsoft has a product that's similar. Can you talk a little bit about what ChatGPT is? Why is that the next level above something like a Siri, and what does it do?
You're absolutely right, Brandon. Siri is nothing more than just speech recognition. It's a very narrow AI trained to just convert sound wave into text that we can just implement our regular search on. What ChatGPT, how radically that is different is that ChatGPT is something we call large language models. So the idea is this: up to the point of large language models, the way we've always trained AI is that we train them in a very specific set of functional tools or knowledge. But large language model, we are essentially training them on everything, on all information. So like the first ChatGPT 3.5 that was launched, I believe it was trained on everything on Wikipedia plus half of all content on the internet. Okay. And because of the way large language models are trained using neural nets, so even when we train them, because we're not training them for a specific task, we don't really know what they are capable or not capable of doing until they are trained. Okay. And as we put more data into it, they develop new capabilities that was not previously there. And honestly, we have no idea how it developed those capabilities by virtue of the fact that it's a neural net and the way neural net works. There's no way for you to actually understand how it works from a logical mathematical standpoint. But what you can do is that you can observe the data that is being put in, and then you can observe new capabilities that emerge. Okay, for example, so one of the early large language model like ChatGPT, it could do a lot of things, but it couldn't do simple math. Okay, and we cannot really explain why it can or why it cannot. We just know it cannot. But then as we train it on more and more data, one day we just wake up and it's like, oh my gosh, it can do math now. And we just cannot explain how it could do math, but it can, And before our readers start to, to wonder if ChatGPT is actually sentient, let me bring some clarity to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a transformer model. So the best way to think about it is like a calculator. You put in some input and then you get some output out of it. So ChatGPT is not an AI program that sits in the background, thinking about stuff and trying to answer the meaning of life or something like that. Okay, if you don't give it an input, it's not going to give you an output. It's not sitting there having dreams or something. Okay, so it's a transformer model. Okay, so as we put more and more data to train it, and then one day we realize it knows Persian. We have no idea how it knows Persian, but it's fluent in Persian.
It can speak the language of Persian,
and it can translate text to Persian. It can translate from Persian back into English. It can understand conversations in Persian, but we have no idea. We have no idea how that happened. But what we do know how to do is to give it more information to learn, and to be trained on. And that is why ChatGPT sparked the imagination for an AGI, because it feels like we're getting very close to being able to create something that functions like the human mind.
Now, this idea of training is very important to these types of AI. So when you say train, ChatGPT is something that's been trained. It's been given the sum of all of this information on the internet by which to process data and kind of think about it. What does it look like to train an AI?
The way we train it, say, for example, if we want to train an AI to recognize an apple versus an orange, we'll give it a bunch of pictures labeled oranges. We'll give it a bunch of pictures labeled apples, and at some point, if you give it enough pictures, you can just give it a random picture of an orange, even though, that's an orange. Or you give it an apple, you go, that's an apple. But the problem is that when you give it a banana, it have no idea what that is, and rightfully so. Okay? Large language models, the way we train it is radically different. We don't give it apples and oranges. We just give it everything on the internet. And then we ask it, is this an apple? No, it doesn't know. Well, give it more information. Just throw more information at it, And then one day you wake up and you show it a picture of an apple and you go, that's an apple. And you go, wow, that's wonderful. So that's kind of how large language model works.
So in ChatGPT, we probably have a lot of listeners who have not had any experience with something like this tool. But Joe, you've actually been using it a little bit. Can you tell us exactly how you go about using that so people get an idea of what it looks like right now?
Yeah, sure. And I'm barely scratching the surface. I'm not an early adapter. I'm kind of early middle. I like the early adapters to work out the kinks and all that. But I guess I'm using it a lot with biblical studies. I find that there's an excellent knowledge base of faith traditions, creeds, theological positions, and all of that. And I've asked it, for example, to summarize certain issues, even summarize chapters of the Bible. And if I'm teaching, I find it's helpful for my students to hear a kind of a high-end summary, and then I go into more detail on it. But it's excellent at sorting through theological positions, relatively fairly summarizing them, what they say about each other. I've used it with some fiction. I've used it with my oldest grandson does a certain type of gaming, and we have fun with it. And we've used it for strategy tips. How do you navigate this level in this game, or things like that's more trivial, I understand. So I'm still kind of on the surface, and I'm constantly hearing about people doing much, much more with it.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, it's basically a website interface. So you go to a specific website, it has a little box where you type in a prompt. So for your summaries, biblical summaries, you just type in what?
Yeah, it might be as simple as describe Ezekiel chapter 25. And then, of course, for longer questions, there's a microphone feature. But for listeners who have no experience with it, just go in the App Store, look for ChatGPT, download the app, and start experimenting. Start with the free app, play around, see how you're using it, what do you like about it, and then think about what you might be able to use it for above that. I, by the way, have friends who have written business plans from it and had it write wills or business agreements. So there's an awful lot it can do, that I'm aware of that I'm not using it for. But I don't know. Every couple of weeks, it occurs to me there's another use that would be good.
I think that's super helpful, just for people to understand exactly how it works and then what is generated.
Yeah, and this is the first time I was explaining it to my oldest grandson. I said, "Go ahead and ask it something." He said, "Okay, how many cities are there with more than 6 million people?" And I said, "No, stop. You can just go on, the internet and ask that. Don't think in those terms. Think about things you think about. Think about things that require strategy." And he said, "Like one of my games?" And I said, "Yes." And we talked about the game. And he asked, and I won't remember the name of the game, "How do I beat level 6 in this game?" And was shocked to get this, if it was printed in a Word doc, it'd be 5 pages. All the strategy tips, which bombs to defuse first and whatever. And, so there was that kind of thing. I wanted to show him it's actually thinking and reasoning through how you approach things.
So Elijah, I've heard people say, well, AI, again, it's kind of in its infancy, really. It's similar to language processing right now. The criticism is AI is only as good as what it's trained with. And that's true to some degree, but what are we seeing along those lines?
And so you're absolutely right. But think about this. If it's only as good as what it's training, what if it's trained on every bit of knowledge that we have as humans? What can that do then? I think like one of the biggest impact is going to be on education. And if there are parents out there listening to this podcast, I want to encourage you to think along the lines of, being able to use it as a parent assistant for, especially if you have young kids, when your kids ask you those ridiculous questions, now you can actually answer them in a way that your child can understand it. So if your 7-year-old, boy come up to you and says, "Mom, Dad, what is quantum physics?" And you cannot remember your quantum, the notes from your quantum physics class in college, or maybe you never took a quantum physics class, you can go to ChatGPT and say, explain quantum physics to a 7-year-old. And it would actually do that in a way a 7-year-old can understand. And that's a game changer. That's a game changer for education, because everything that previously we thought that, you need to reach a certain age or level of understanding to be able to understand it. What if you could re-explain it in a way that, you don't have to reach that age to understand it?
I was fascinated by that in your book. Explain whatever, I think it might have been quantum mechanics to a 7-year-old. And, boy, it really did that. Changing gears a little bit, we hear a lot about the good. And of course, technology can be exploited for bad purposes. My mind immediately goes to the subject of fraud. Okay, we're all used to the internet communications from the widow of a general in some remote part of the world who needs to move $16 million to you. Okay, that's all fine. I think I understood from you somewhere that AI can imitate a human voice by hearing as little as 4 or 5 seconds of someone speak. And now I'm thinking about AI generates the image of a face, combines the voice, goes through a few thousand scenarios of what a conversation might look like. And now suddenly I get a call or even a Google Meet request from my boss.
Yeah.
And he or she is sitting there telling me about some urgent need and instructing me to wire money somewhere or something like that. And I'm engaging in the conversation, and AI has anticipated the likely questions I'll ask. And I seem to be having a conversation with someone. It seems to me that this kind of thing is not far-fetched.
Actually, it's already happening. So this is something called deepfake. This is one of the threats or those dangers that I talk about in my book. I go through a few of them, and one of them is deepfake. And Deepfake is basically the ability for AI now to replicate your voice, your videos. So you can be on a Zoom call and an AI could basically appear and talk and sound and use your mannerism and use your language and your vocabulary, to hold a pretty decent conversation. Okay. And where that becomes a problem is when we have what we call bad actors, people who have bad intentions. So a very common one would be like, you send your kids off to college, your kids get a phone call from an AI that sounds exactly like you saying that, hey, I'm filling up some forms for your college financial aid, I need some financial information from you. I just don't have it right now. What's your social security number? And your son or daughter would just freely give it because it sounds exactly like you, and give all this information, and then they have access to your banking information after that. So where it becomes even more interesting is for democratic countries, who believe in, not who believe, but who uses the public opinion. So when you have these deep fakes, that start to proliferate, on the internet, showing a video of someone saying something or doing something, you don't really know if that video can be trusted, or if their speech is true, So, and then it gets even more interesting when other countries start to try to extend their influence over other countries, So you can imagine, what if there are other countries that try to influence the American political process by releasing videos, so that they can nudge the American publics towards voting for a candidate that would be more favorable to their country.
Yeah. And the trial lawyers, by the way, thinking of the economic issues, trial lawyers are on the sidelines rubbing their hands together in anticipation of all the coming litigation. And the best part is AI can write the briefs and the litigation as well. So.
Yeah.
Well, I hope as our listeners, again, thinking about those who are Christians, for our listeners, some little, maybe some ticklers or red flags are raising in their mind along the lines of discernment to say, wow, this is an incredible thing. It's new. It's going to take some new levels of discernment, as God's word tells us to do. And we want to say we're going to get there in just a few minutes to talk about how we process this from our Christian worldview. But we also want to talk a little bit about the economic disruption that AI can bring. And this kind of can come and have a human cost to AI or also a human benefit. Because, Elijah, I know that you're optimistic about a lot of these things, but talk about the idea of AI and economic disruption as far as jobs, job loss. AI is going to take my job. AI is going to provide new jobs. Say a little bit about that.
Let's talk about disruptions from an economic perspective. Okay, let's backtrack a little bit to the internet revolution. If you take I like to use a very old but simple theory, of Adam Smith, factors of production. Okay, where it's a very simple theory that basically says that to produce something, you need 4 factors. Okay, you need land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Okay, and if you were to increase any one of these 4 factors, you increase your production or you increase your goods or services that is produced. Okay, and so if you look at the internet from the factor of production perspective, from what that did was that everything prior to the internet required us to increase one of these 4 factors, but more importantly, our production was tied in to these 4 factors. Okay, that means if you take a Blockbuster, okay, to increase the sales for Blockbuster, you need to have more stores, you need to have more VHS or DVDs, you need to have more capital, you need to have more labor, you need to have more employees. Okay, what the internet did was to smash the factor of production for land, and basically said that it's not that you do not need land anymore; it's that you do not need land to scale when you want to scale production, when you scale your production of goods and services. And because Blockbuster did not understand it, Blockbuster was actually one of the first few companies to go into streaming, by the way. They adopted the technology, they worked on the technology, but they did not understand the economic impact of the technology. So they did not try to scale their business with the exclusion of land. And so that's how you get Netflix today. Netflix was built without scaling land, but they still needed to scale labor, they still needed to scale capital. And that's why Google has 150,000 employees. Even though they do not need land to scale, but they still need labor to scale. Now, what AI is going to do is that AI is going to do the exact same thing to labor as what the internet did for land. So it's basically saying that it's not that you do not need labor, you do not need labor to scale your business or your production or your output. So that is the important dynamic that we need to understand here, is that we need to rethink a lot of businesses and ask ourselves, how do we build businesses? How do we build industry if we do not need to scale labor to scale production?
Yeah, permit me to interrupt here. I think this is an excellent point you're making. And there was a CNBC article not long ago that said 37% of business leaders claim that AI replaced workers in 2023. This was an Asana survey. Current employees say that almost 30% of their tasks are replaceable by AI. And Goldman Sachs, and I think you might have mentioned this somewhere, is predicting that AI could lead to a 20% job loss, or 30 million persons in the next decade. So this is the question I have for you. And I get that this probably happened with every disruptive revolution. Probably the Industrial Revolution had farmers in a panic because of what machines were doing. Okay, I get that. It's always been a part, and we adapt and everything. There are some voices saying that there are some aspects of AI that are so uniquely disruptive that the disruptive forces this time will be on a greater scale even than the internet.
Yeah.
And there simply will not be enough creation of job employees for most of the services that we're used to, at least not for a good 20, 30, perhaps 40 years until we've changed the nature of how we function as a society. Now, again, that could be what everybody says with every disruptive revolution. Do you have thoughts on that? Is there something unique about AI's disruptive power that makes it different from others? Or is this just the typical fearful reaction at the beginning of a revolution?
So let's look at what Goldman Sachs say. So Goldman Sachs is, honestly, they're some of the most brilliant people working for them. I'm sure they had a lot of models before they arrived at a projection of a 300 million job loss. And that's probably their conservative estimate. Okay. That they're willing to stand behind and say, yeah, we can stand behind that number, and that's 300 million. And to put things in perspective, during the Great Depression, our best estimate was a job loss of 60 million. So we are talking about 5 times that of the Great Depression. Okay, and that's their conservative estimate. Okay, and that is in alignment with, if you look at it, when I talk about the factors of production of labor, changing, where you do not need to scale that to scale production. And so you can look at it through eyes of fear and ask yourself, what are we going to do? Are we going to get jobs back? Well, first of all, those jobs will be gone and gone permanently. And will we be able to create new jobs? Well, the problem is that when we create new businesses, they're not going to require more jobs. Creating new businesses doesn't necessarily create more jobs. But we've got to look at it through eyes of faith and ask ourselves, this is our one chance as a Christian opportunity, not going to be the only chance, but it's a chance. It's a chance for the Christian opportunity, for the Christian community to take leadership and say, what do we want the world to be? Because we're going to unlock so much human capital and the ability to build and scale businesses that can provide solutions, that we can reinvent the world. Think about this. Instead of thinking of 300 million job loss, think about it as we can unlock 300 million human capital to now pursue things that we previously could not pursue because we didn't have enough resources. For example, what about finding a cure for every known disease in the world? If we unlock 300 million human capital, and if we just assume that 10% of them have some form of scientific ability, can we deploy them to find cures for every known disease? That's 30 million people. We could potentially find cures for every known disease right now, and partner them with AI. That becomes very feasible. So we have an energy problem. Well, let's deploy them to find new sources of energy. We have human trafficking problem. Well, let's just take a couple of million of them and partner them with AI and go after that problem. We can begin to look at the world and solve all our existing struggles and issues and challenges, but we can even take it to the next level. We can say, let's be aspirational. If we are children of God, and God's our Father, and what would his family business be? His family business, according to Genesis 1:28, would be to govern this earth. Okay, and if that's the case, then our family business, if you can think about it, is the governing of this earth. If it's the governing of this earth, in the way that God intended it to be, then we can become more aspirational. We can ask ourselves, if God is our Father, what kind of world would bring joy and delight to him? What are the things, that would be moonshots for humanity to achieve? And now let's go deploy 20, 30 million people, to go after these moonshot projects, ending of poverty. Let's go for it, to be an interstellar species, we can do that now, just deploy another 10 million people,
Permit me to interject here, and I really want to get back to this. This is, I think, is really the heart of what we want to talk about. A real-life example I witnessed. I've been going to India, on and off since 1979, 1980. The first time I went, there was a large percentage of people living in poverty. I visited a number of cities. I remember one city seeing hundreds of people carry bricks on their head to build a road. And I asked a local official, well, why aren't you using machinery? He said, because these people would have no work. They'd be out of business and all. And so they were intentionally avoiding certain types of technology. Nobody had a phone. It wasn't too long after that I went back and everyone had a cell phone. The cost of the technology had come down so much. Cell phones were still at that time a little bit of a status symbol in the U.S. Well, India leapfrogged where we were. They didn't need to lay lines or anything. And then I watched as the city of Bangalore became a tech center. That group that's impoverished kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And those technology-driven changes improved the lifestyle of the average citizen in India dramatically. And it's still driving that way. They're not rid of poverty, but they have a much larger middle class by their standards and all. Now, that was simply the use of technology. How much more if Christians have a vision to bring godly values to the world, well, to kind of implement things the way you've been discussing. Brendan, do you have thoughts on this? I'd like to hear your...
Yeah, and I love, this is kind of the wrestling match that I think we'll be in, because as we talk about the disruption and the potential for human suffering and watching people lose their jobs, not be able to provide for families and things like that, we need to have that in view, because we need to care. All of humanity is made in the image of God, and we want to be able to care for them. Jesus tells us to care for the poor. If more people are going to be poor, that's going to have implications for how we do ministry. At the same time, and I think this is a both and, it's not an either or, both and, look at church planning, for instance. Right now, if you want to go and if I want to start a church in another part of our vast metropolitan Phoenix area, I got to think, okay, well, I'm going to probably need a minimum amount of these people, or at least volunteers, and I got to figure out how to do a website if I'm going to be writing sermons and I'm going to be doing. But with AI tools, now I can say, okay, AI can actually take all these administrative things of starting a church off the table. It'll just automatically do them. It'll generate anything I want with a simple set of keystrokes. And then I can put my attention towards shepherding the people that I'm reaching in the neighborhood that I'm going to plant this church in. And so that optimistic look at it, I think, is something we need to do. Because honestly, I think I hear more of the doomsayer, and that could just be the fact that, our 24-hour news culture likes to focus on negatives. I hear more of the doomsdayers more than I do the optimistic opportunity people. And so I really appreciate that perspective of saying, hey, look at the opportunities that might be open with these AI tools that are going to free us up to be able to focus on, honestly, the Great Commission and what Jesus is calling us to do in the world.
Right. And think about this also, just within a church setting, okay? You have probably going to have a number of people in church that has some calling on their life, but they were not able to act on it either because they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have the resources, or they didn't have the time, right? So there's some things they want to pursue, maybe to solve the homelessness problem. Maybe they want to help orphans. There's a lot of things that's on their heart that the Lord have placed. Now they can say, you know what? Maybe I can partner with AI to do this. Maybe I may not understand a lot about this calling that I have, but you know what? The AI can teach me, and I can learn in a really rapid way with AI. And maybe they can band together. Just 2 or 3 people can create a nonprofit organization and solve a problem that previously they were not able to because they didn't have the resources. But now with AI, they can. And this is what we need to do. We need to spark the imagination and rekindle their calling. What is it that you wanted to do when you were 6-year-old, when you were 10-year-old, before we in the education system told you that dream was impossible?
Yeah, Elijah, I love your optimism. How do you, and I'm already hearing people ask questions like this. And again, I think this is what Brendan was discussing. There's a tendency to focus on the negative. But I'm hearing people already talk about, Revelation 13, 15, that the false prophet is able to, give the image of the beast is able to speak and communicate. And immediately they're seeing the potential negative uses, economic control over lives and all of that. How would you respond to somebody who starts the conversation with those types of?
First of all, that part of the Bible is mysterious for a reason. And it's hard to know if any of our interpretation is even right. We know we have some better interpretation than we did previously. But the question is that, are you going to allow fear to hinder you or to block you from living the best life you could have? And this is an opportunity for you to partner with AI to pursue dreams that you thought you're not able to pursue. This is an opportunity for you to partner with AI to achieve things that you're not able to. Are you going to allow fear, to handcuff you to your limitation?
I think we get then to kind of one of the questions that we posed at the beginning, which I don't know if we've taken head on, but I'd love to get your perspective, Elijah, is AI then, do you see it? A lot of our discussion has been, well, you can use it for good and bad actors can use it for bad. And it has good applications for job and economics, and it has some negative implications. So that would seem that we've been dancing around the idea that AI is like any other technological tool that we've encountered throughout history. Is it just another tool like the internet? I know it has implications beyond something like the internet that we've talked about already, but is it just a neutral tool that can be used for good or ill, or is there something more to it? What would be your perspective on that?
I would say it's like fire. Let's talk about something more fundamental. It's like fire. If fire can be used for good, and fire can be used for bad. So I think it's not good or bad. It's the actors behind it, the corporations behind it, and the entities behind it that can use it for good or for bad. But it's going to have a bigger implication on society than any technological revolution since the electricity. It's going to have a huge amount, and it's going to happen in a much shorter time. And so that's why, Christians needs to really begin to have discernment and to have faith and aspiration, and not function out of fear in this season, because the world can look very differently depending on how we Christians respond to it today.
Yeah, Elijah, we're going to wrap up in a little bit, but I want to remind our listeners that your book is available. It's Elijah Low, L-O-W, Navigating AI with Faith. Quickly, where can people find the book?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon Kindle, as well as in the paperback version. It's on Amazon. Yeah,
I love where we've gotten to as far as AI as a tool, but it's a tool that we can't ignore, because it's going to have a changing effect on the world at a scale of which we probably have not seen yet in our lifetime. And so I was trying to think of an analogy, like, the first century Christians being like, well, Rome and the roads and the infrastructure that they're building. I mean, that's neat, but I'm not going to worry about that. We'll just do our thing. Well, no, you're probably going to need to pay attention to the technological advances coming in the first century, because it's going to have huge implications on Christianity and what you're able to do and how you're able to spread the gospel, and also what it's going to do to the world at large. And so I think what we want to also hear from you, Elijah, and Joe to weigh in as well, is we are continually encouraged with any tools, with any culture that we encounter. God's word really encourages us towards this idea. We've mentioned it already, this idea of discernment. We see in 1 John 4 where John is encouraging early Christians to test the spirits. You're going to hear a lot of things coming, and things are going to be coming at you. Christians, you need to test every spirit, put it up against the word of God and what we've taught you to see, is this something that is of value or is it not? Romans 12 talks about don't be conformed to the direction the world is going, but be transformed. Renew your mind in conjunction with the scriptures as they've been taught. In Matthew 10, Jesus, he encourages, be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. There's this discernment language all throughout the Bible. Elijah, just from a faith perspective, how have you thought about the idea of discernment when it comes to these issues of AI?
I think the verse that comes to me is 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. So I think when it comes to AI, if you are feeling fear, okay, I think you're going the wrong direction. So it doesn't matter what the issue is, doesn't matter what the concern is, we cannot, as Christians in this season, operate out of fear. I think we got to operate out of, of power and love and self-control. And more importantly, I think we got to seek not just the mind of God, but the heart of God in this situation and say, here's an opportunity, as your children to change the world. How do you want us to change it? What should it look like? How can I be part of that? Because AI is going to give us the opportunity to do just that, for people to pursue their dreams that have been latent, that have been hidden. Now's the time. This is going to be the best years of their lives. So I think that should how discernment should operate in this season.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm thinking when the first printing press was invented, Gutenberg's and by the way, the first book printed was a Bible. I could imagine people standing around saying, this is disastrous. Now we can print things quickly, and all the evil things in the world are going to be printed now, and horrible things against God and all of that. Well, it's just not the way we're supposed to look at things. Mm-hmm. These are transformative technologies, yes. But I like what you said, and I think the thing that has always impressed me with this kind of issue is, Romans 12:2, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That may sound like it's not directly on point, but I think it is in the sense that it's calling for you to make constant, ongoing evaluations. And for that reason, you're not operating in fear. You're operating in a kind of faith, kind of belief that God is able to use these things to redeem them for good. And, the way the printing press allowed the gospel to be printed more quickly. I'm hearing now from sources who have been translating the Bible that the ongoing project to translate the Bible into every known language is going to be accelerated by artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
So here's a method now to literally bring the gospel to every tribe, every ethnos, every people group on earth. So I think we want to think in those terms as well. And yes, we'll always have bad actors. That we've never been promised that we'll be free of bad actors, but the technology is there anyway. The bad actors will be using it. Why shouldn't we be looking to redeem it all the time and have a transformative view of it and take everything that we have? Look, if the Romans built a great system of roads, well, Paul had a transformative view. It allowed him to travel around cities and go to cities and preach the gospel. I think those principles have always been in play for us.
That's exactly right. If we look at, the mission of our church is love God, love people, make disciples. That make disciples comes from the Great Commission in Matthew, where Jesus says, hey, go and make disciples of all nations. In Acts, he says, hey, you're going to go to Jerusalem, Judea, to the ends of the earth, Samaria, and go and be my witnesses. And these technological tools give us even greater opportunities to be able to do that. And at the same time, knowing the brokenness and fallen nature of our world, we as Christians, like any other point in history, need to constantly be taking every every bit of technology, every tool, everything that's been generated by those tools, and putting it up against this beautiful measuring stick that God has provided in His Word, that is an absolute rock that we can stand on, to be able to, like 1 John says, test the spirits, test what you've seen, to what Romans 12 says, to be able to renew your mind within the context of God's Word, and then move boldly forward in using these tools to fulfill that Great Commission. And I think that is a great perspective to have, and really kind of an energizing one, an exciting one to think about. And I love that you are in that space of thinking those things through, Elijah. It's been great.
There's so much more we would have loved to have gone into with you. You go into a lot more depth in your book, of course, and some of the economic issues, the effect on medicine, the effect on government, and all of that. I like the bonus chapter a lot, the jobs that are most at risk due to AI. And I think even there, it's like any time in history, we're constantly exposed to disruptions for a number of reasons, a great number of reasons. And if we can see the trouble coming and get out ahead of it, then why not? We should be leading the way as Christians for that. So we always like to give our guests the last word. Any closing thoughts before we depart?
I think my closing thought would be, have faith, look at the world through eyes of faith, seek the Lord, hear not just His mind, but His heart, and be courageous.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and Godspeed in all that you do.
Okay. God bless.
Well, and as always, if this content has been helpful for you on this podcast, please be sharing it with others. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber already to Viewpoint as a podcast. We have episodes planned throughout the year. Again, engaging these cultural issues through the lens of the Bible, encountering the world around us with the hope of the gospel, and that is our aim on all of these topics. So we'd encourage you to do that. Leave a review if you're able to. Again, not because we want to build up our egos, but because as you leave reviews, the algorithms that govern podcasts will say, hey, this content is of value, and it's going to present that through its algorithms into a lot more people. And also, if you've got a question or even a show topic suggestion for us, you can email us. We have an email address. It's just viewpoint@highlandschurch.org. That's viewpoint@highlandschurch.org. That gets to both Joe and I. We would love to hear from you. Any feedback or suggestions for future episodes. But until our next conversation, God bless you, and we will see you next time.